My official clock on my phone says it's 7:02, so shall we begin? I'd like to call to order the Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals Thursday, March 4th, 2021 meeting, 7 p.m. Please call the roll. Here.
Here. Here. Here. Present.
Okay, the first thing on the agenda is a motion to approve the previous minutes, and we all have the previous minutes, I believe, before us.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. By voice vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Being no old business, being no old business, we will begin with the new business. We'll start with petition number 21P-1559 in the matter of the petition of Gerald M. Zellhofer, address 1749 Winding Road, Amboy, Illinois. Petition is for a special use permit. Now comes the petitioner, Gerald Zellhofer, by and through his attorney, Courtney Kennedy of Erman Gelbach Badger Considine LLC, and petitions the Lee County Board for the issuance of a special use permit and support thereof states as follows. The petition is brought pursuant to Section 10-9 of the Lee County Zoning Ordinance. Zellhofer owns the real estate commonly known as 1749 Winding Road, Amboy, Lee County, Illinois, and legally described as permanent parcel number 13-21-01-101-005. Property is presently zoned Ag 1 Rural Agricultural District under Section 10-9 of the Ordinance. Construction and farm equipment, machinery, sales, service is permitted. Special use in Ag 1 districts. Zellhofer operates Triple Z LLC, an Illinois limited liability company whose principal place of business is 1749 Winding Road, Amboy, Lee County, Illinois. Triple Z is engaged in the construction of agricultural buildings. In addition, Zellhofer, as a sole proprietor, owns and operates Z-Best Enterprises, a business primarily engaged in the production of steel roofing, lawn care and landscaping services, and general carpentry. Petitioner respectfully requests the Lee County Zoning Board of Appeals recommend approval of the petition to the Lee County Board. The petitioner further requests that Lee County Board approve the petition for the special use. Mr. Zellhofer, would you?
I'd like to.
Wait a minute. He needs to be sworn in.
I'd like to say a little something first
Yes.
before he begins.
Yes. Would I?
I would like to make a
you would.
presentation.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
I get that opportunity. I'd like to give a little historic timeline on parcel 13-21-01-101-005, addressed as 1749 Winding Road, Amboy. I feel it's important that you as board members need to know how the property has evolved over the past 20 plus years. And I'm going to use pictures taken through Google Earth throughout the presentation to show you the changes from year to year on the parcel. On October 4th, 1998, Mr. Jared Zellhofer petitioned. Sorry, Mike.
That's fine. Do what you can. There you go. Now I can see it fine.
Mr. Zellhofer petitioned the county for a 2-lot residential subdivision. Speaking on behalf of her son, Debbie Zellhofer stated that the property is a family farm and her son would like to build a home on about 2.9 acres. She also told the Planning Commission at that time in the future that other family members might be interested in building a cabin. The petition was approved by the Planning Commission on November 2nd, 1998. On October 28, 1998, Circle F Farms applied for a building permit for a 3,616 square foot pole building. Well, actually, if you look at the permit, it's for a 40 by 64 structure, a 12 by 40 lean-to, and a 24 by 24 structure under the zoning classification of an Ag 1 agricultural district. The building permit was approved on November 9th, 1998. The parcel had not been split at the time of the submitting of the permit. The aerial photo taken from Google Earth in 1999 of the property at 1749 Winding Road. As you see, the 3 buildings have been constructed. Mr. Zellhofer applied for a building permit on July 24th in 2001 for a 1,920 square foot metal shed. According to the permit, the property was still considered Ag 1 agriculturally zoned. Note the $50 late fee that was assessed. An aerial view taken from Google Earth in April of 2005 of the property in 1749 Winding Road. As you can sort of make out, the 2 dominant structures are there. A year later, Google Earth supplied us with a clearer picture of the 2 structures. Zellhofer applied for a building permit on August 7, 2007 for a 480 square foot lean-to building. Submitted with the permit was a site plan where you can see where the lean-to will be constructed. One year later, on September 29, 2008, Mr. Zellhofer applied for a building permit to construct a 1,375 square foot single-family home at 1749 Winding Road. Part of the required documents to obtain a building permit to build a house is approval from the Health Department for well and septic. The Health Department letter here, it says, to the best of this department's knowledge and based upon available records, it is our finding that a permitted private sewage disposal system has not been installed on the property. And then after a visual inspection was conducted and a private sewer disposal system appears to be present on the property, but was never permitted. Also part of the building permit requirement is to submit a site plan as to where on the property the home or building will be constructed. This shows the zoning office that the setbacks from the property lines are in compliance with an Ag 1 agricultural setback distance, which is 15 feet from the side and rear property lines. The site plan, I'm assuming, was drawn by Mr. Zellhofer. Note the largest building labeled shop. Google Maps picture taken a year later on October 9th, 2009, showing the newly constructed home. One year later in August 2010, Google Earth shows an added addition to the south portion of the north building, the shop. No permit was acquired. On March 10th, 2011, 0.52 acres was surveyed off, added to the west side of the property. 6 days later, on March 16, 2011, Jared applied for a building permit for a 960 square foot accessory building. No site plan was submitted. And 2 months later, Mr. Zellhofer applied for a building permit for 3 buildings, one 840 square foot building, one 448 square foot building, and one 1,056 square foot building. No site plans were submitted then. Late that same year, Google Earth pictures show the expansion on the west side of the property. These were the new buildings that were added. And note the 3 access driveways. In May 2013, Google Earth picture shows an added what I'm going to call a material yard south of the home. In 2015, Google Earth shows an added structure to the east side of the south building. No permit was acquired then. 2 years later, in September of 2017, Google Earth shows yet another added structure to the northwest side of the buildings. This structure is approximately 8,600 square feet, and there was no permit acquired. Mr. Zellhofer is here tonight per my requirement. I got involved with Mr. Zellhofer when a home he was constructing on another parcel had not gone through the zoning office for permitting. Looking into other properties that Mr. Zellhofer owned, I came across 1749 and 1760 Winding Road. Digging deeper into the files and looking at the county's aerial photos, I found that Mr. Zellhofer had added an extremely large building to 1749 Winding Road, also with no permits. While driving by the property, I observed 2 trucks crossing from the 1749 address to across the road. At 1760 Winding Road to a structure that I would compare to as a large open utility building. I questioned the type of business. Oh, sorry. I questioned the type of business that was being carried on here, which concerned me since the properties are zoned Ag 1 agricultural. Feeling that Mr. Zellhofer was involved in more than just agricultural business and finding that consistent lack of permits needed to be obtained. By the way, the last building permit taken out by Mr. Zellhofer was in 2011. I felt Mr. Zellhofer needed to come in and rezone this property. This is a Facebook posting with pictures on January 2018 from the Z-Best Metal Facebook page. And I'll read this to you. Over halfway done with our new trim shop. Already have some of our sheet coils in their new home. Sneak peek into our new shop where all the maintenance to our fleet will be done. In February 2019, Mr. Zellhofer came to the zoning office to petition for an I-1 zoning on 7.61 acres off of Route 52, as you may all recall. When trying to decide what it is that Mr. Zellhofer wanted to do in this property and what to rezone it for, Jared handed me his business card. When I was researching for this petition, I remembered Mr. Zellhofer had handed me his business card with his phone number, and on it was his address at 1749 Winding Road, which clearly states we manufacture steel roofing and siding. This is the county's aerial photo taken April 2019 of the property. The green dotted line represents the original two-lot residential subdivision split in 1998. The blue highlighted box is Mr. Zellhofer's property. From this green line to the red line on the west of the property shows the added 0.52 acre that was surveyed and added in 2011. From the green line to the red line on the west side of the property shows the recently added acreage was requested by the zoning office because of setback violations to where Mr. Zellhofer had placed structures along and onto the property to the south. This slide is a copy of the 1749 Winding Road property card obtained through the Lee County Assessment Office, showing the added structures throughout the years. Each structure has been numbered, along with the added square footage. According to the Assessment Office, there has been 14 structures added since 1998, and that is not including a canopy in the house. The yellow highlighted areas shows the legally permitted structures. Total square footage of all the buildings is 20,884. Total square footage of legally permitted buildings, 10,695. In an interview with the Lee County Sheriff Corporal Yater and Jared Zellhofer, a list from the Lee County Zoning Office of potential violation codes and statutes were given to Mr. Zellhofer. Building permit violations, health code permits, rezoning permit requirements, commercial inspections, life safety inspections, plumbing regulations. On January 31st, 2020, in response to the violations listed, Mr. Zellhofer, not Miranda-sized, explained how he stated that he started a lawn care business in 1998 and didn't become a building component type business until 2010, 2011. Mr. Zellhofer said he was being taxed on all the buildings and was currently writing the Lee County tax assessor concerning the removal of buildings that he was currently being taxed on. He said many building permits have been obtained on this property over the years, and that any that were not for that, my previous tax assessor, Bob Lauer, told me not to worry too much about getting permits from his township because he routinely does inspections and catches all new additions and or structures for taxes. Anytime we build a building or add it on, we made sure to try to follow all county setbacks obtained from the zoning office. The county even made, Mr. Zellhofer says, buy me another acre on the west side because setbacks obtained from the zoning office, in order to make the last building addition have the proper setbacks, even though my family and I owned the adjoining properties. Mr. Zellhofer said, I'm not the only person that the assessor Bob Lauer gave this advice to, but in retrospect, I maybe should have done things differently. The bottom line, Mr. Zellhofer said, is I believe most of the problems are misunderstandings or misinterpretations. I am more than happy to sit down with Dee at the Lee County office and try to work these issues out. He says this building has been used for commercial since 1999 when he got the first permit from Chris Hinkle for lawn care and landscape business. That every structure at this address is being taxed. Anytime driveways were added, the proper township commissioners were contacted. To his knowledge, every building on the property meets setbacks. And to his knowledge, the fire marshal and plumbing inspections are not required. Health department permits were obtained and multiple well and septic inspections have been done. And to his knowledge, any required audits or business inspections have been done. I've given you 20 years history of 1749 Winding Road property and shown to you the concerns I've had. I've required Mr. Zellhofer to petition the county for the business he has conducted on this property to conform to the requirements of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Zellhofer is petitioning for a special use in an Ag 1 rural agricultural district that allows for construction and farm equipment / machinery sales and service. Based on what I have presented and knowing that this property was originally a 2-lot residential subdivision, I feel that clearly this is an industrial use of land and does not follow the comprehensive plan, which is in this area is rural agricultural. Given the information by the assessment office and the zoning violations of building permits that were not obtained, it is my opinion that the requested special use for production of steel roofing, lawn care and landscape service, and general carpentry would not be recommended by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that Mr. Zellhofer's business would be required to move to a more appropriately zoned parcel.
Zellhofer? Go ahead. Yep. Yep.
Steffi, do you always investigate individuals that you come across in your role as zoning administrator?
No,
And how many times have you run a 20-year history on a petitioner?
when I was investigating this one, I did.
Okay. But is this the only petitioner you've ever investigated?
No,
And how far back have you gone back when you conducted your investigations on a petitioner?
not that far back.
How does the zoning office generally notify an individual or business of a zoning violation? Is it by way of a letter?
Yes,
And isn't it true that the first time you notified Mr. Zellhofer of this zoning violation was through the Lee County Sheriff's Office serving him with a violation?
yes.
And why did you take that tact with Mr. Zellhofer instead of just sending him the general letter like you normally do?
I was new in the position and I didn't know how to go about the proper procedures.
And can you approximate how many other individuals or businesses that you served notice by the Lee County Sheriff?
None.
Was Mr. Zellhofer the only one that you served through that method?
Yes,
In your opinion, as the Lee County zoning administrator, does the county have some sort of responsibility in reviewing certain properties to ensure compliance?
Yeah.
Sure. So in your position as a Lee County zoning administrator, do you feel that the county, Lee County, has some responsibility in reviewing properties within its boundaries?
yes,
And isn't it true that Lee County would have some responsibility in this situation right here?
yes.
And you mentioned through your testimony that you've required Mr. Zellhofer to conform to the zoning requirements of Lee County, is that correct? But ultimately, you are suggesting that the ZBA not recommend his petition for special use permit.
Correct.
Are you familiar with Triple Z LLC?
Yes,
And what is Triple Z LLC?
actually, I don't know. I don't know.
Did you do any Facebook search for Triple Z LLC?
No,
Did you look Triple Z LLC up on the Illinois Secretary of State's website?
no,
So it's a fair statement that you don't know what Triple Z is, what business it's engaged in, or when it was organized. Is that fair?
Correct.
You also mentioned that you feel that Mr. Zellhofer's request for special use permit should be denied because he has previous building permits that were not obtained. Is that a fair statement?
partly, yes.
And what basis do you make that determination on?
Why don't I feel it should?
Correct.
I believe it's an industrial business he's conducting. not an agricultural business.
But that's a use argument. Is that fair?
Yes,
The building permits have nothing to do with that argument.
correct.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Zellhofer, would you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth? I need you to sign this. You state your name.
My name is Jared Michael Zellhofer.
Going to have to talk into the
Because
microphone.
we've got people on Zoom.
Jared Michael Zellhofer.
And you got to get real close to it, Jared.
How's this? One more time. Jared Michael Zellhofer.
Mr. Chairman, I'm amenable to however you want me to proceed with this. I can ask Mr. Zellhofer questions, or I can go ahead and read a statement for him.
I would like to have him explain what he would like.
Okay.
What he's looking for in the zoning.
Would you like me to read a statement, or would you like?
Just, it's up to you. It's your time to tell us what you're looking for
Okay.
and why you're here.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. So I guess I'd like to read a statement first and then probably take some questions if you have any. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jared Zellhofer. I own and operate Z-Best Enterprises and Triple Z LLC, located at 1749 Winding Road in Amboy, Illinois, and have for the last 22 years. We currently employ between 12 and 20 full-time people, depending on the season. In the last 22 years, I have employed over 125 people, including many children from the Amboy Schools Co-op program. I started Z-Best in 1999 as a lawn care, tree, and small construction business. Around that same time, I purchased the property located at 1749 and built a post-frame building with living quarters in it to run my business out of. We went to see Chris Hinkle in zoning department, explain exactly what we were going to do. Chris was very helpful then and at several other times that I met with him over the years. Over the years, my business grew and we added more services and products. In 2008, after the crash, we found ourselves in a bad spot like most other companies. With so many people out of work, the lawn care landscape industry was an easy target for people without jobs and very little overhead. So we found it hard to compete with them. I knew the business would have to evolve in order to survive and not go bankrupt like so many other companies. In 2011, we expanded the construction business to include making some of the products we used in our pole barn packages that we put up. That part of the business has grown dramatically. In 2015, I had to split the construction business, Triple Z, away from Z-Best because of a variety of insurance requirements. Both businesses operate out of the same property, share the same buildings, share several pieces of equipment, employees, legal and accounting, etc. Z-Best and Triple Z have always given back to the community in several ways. I have raised tens of thousands of dollars for the local school district, supported every kind of sports organization, the Amboy Park District, the Sublette Park District, Knights of Columbus, Depot Days, Amboy Police Department, Amboy Fire Department, Sublette Fire Department, Lee County Sheriff's Department, and Girl Scouts. Z-Best has paid over $610,000 in sales tax to the county, and we're poised to pay over another $100,000 this year to the county. We have never had any complaints from any neighbors on the road. As a matter of fact, there's only 6 houses on the entire road, and 3 of them belong to either my mother and or my employees. The reason that I'm here is at Dee's request that after 22 years that I need to change the zoning. We're going through this petition to try to do that, and now I'm a little lost for words, because if I'm understanding her presentation, she's asking you to deny me the zoning that she's told me that I need to apply for in the first place to be compliant. So I'm not quite understanding. I've tried to cooperate at every step of the way, from the sheriff to dealing with Dee at every turn. But now I must admit I'm a little lost for words, because I'm not understanding why she's asking you to deny what she's asked me to go for. And that's about all I have for an opening statement.
I will clarify something for you. It is not Dee's decision, number one. It's the decision of the zoning board, number one. And from the zoning board, it goes on to the county board.
Okay.
And the county board is the final one that makes the decision. We are a recommending board, and we go forward from there. What I do want to say, as a business owner myself, who did get all my building permits and did everything correctly, I'm somewhat offended by you not getting those building permits and not getting your buildings on the tax rolls. That upsets me, because in that way, I feel that you are somewhat stealing from every taxpayer in the county by not paying your share.
Okay, I understand that, but I don't believe that to be accurate. I believe the buildings were being taxed, and I was paying tax on all of those structures.
Okay.
I understand the building permit, but I'm saying I don't believe I wasn't paying tax.
But I just want you to understand that. And when we went through and the county went through and looked at all of the building permits that were not gotten within the county, it's pretty ugly when you go from the mapping system in 2014 to the mapping system in 2019. So I just want you to understand 2 or 3 things. Number one, if you had built without a building permit in DeKalb County, they would have asked you to take your structure down. If you did it in Whiteside County, they would ask you to take your structures down. If you did it in Winnebago County, they would ask you to take your structures down. In Joe Davies County, they would tell you to take the structures down. So you're here, and it's the situation of, we feel like you're here on the position of it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And I just want you to know 2 things. From here on out, it'd be better to ask permission than forgiveness. Number two, I want you to know this also, because you have a construction company, and I'm assuming you help people build buildings and whatever. At least that's my assumption on it. And I want you to know that also the county has set into a program that if you are a construction company building a building for someone else without a building permit, you can be fined also.
Understood.
I just want you to be aware of that. But as I say, every taxpayer, I mean, if you didn't pay your taxes, didn't do your fair share, then every other taxpayer should be offended.
Understood.
With that, anybody on the board have questions for Mr. Zellhofer?
Yes, I do. Mr. Zellhofer, your business card that you had given to D. Duffy indicates we manufacture steel roofing and siding. Do you in fact manufacture it at that location?
Yes.
How many employees do you have?
In total, or do you mean for one specific business?
You said both businesses are being run out of the single location, so give me the total.
It varies between 12 and 20, depending on the time of the year.
Are you aware of the limitations of the family-owned business ordinances?
Not all of them, some of them.
Okay,
Is that the one where you can work from your home and you're exempt from commercial zoning as long as you have 0 employees, you don't manufacture, you don't have any signage, things of that nature?
yeah, family-based business.
Yeah, and you can't have any employees, right?
Mhm.
Okay, a little familiar with it.
Okay. So, and you believe based on the fact that you're manufacturing and the fact that you have approximately a dozen employees plus or minus, that the special use for an ag is an appropriate request?
Yes. Because there's joint businesses there.
Okay. No further questions at this time.
You have any questions? Mike, do you have any questions?
Still on mute.
Yeah, okay, now can you? Jared, what have you done about the permits that were not filed? Have you cleaned them up? Have you paid penalties on them?
Well, Dee can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it, nothing's being done with the permits on that particular property until this issue is resolved. Dee and I have worked on some other properties, but we haven't done anything on this one until this is resolved. So in other words, I have not been instructed to do anything with the permits.
Has she given you an amount that's due?
I don't believe so.
No further questions right now.
Okay.
Mr. Zellhofer, you were asked a question about whether or not you feel that you should obtain a special use because of the manufacturing side of the business. Do you feel that you qualify for the special use because of Triple Z and its involvement in the construction of agricultural buildings?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Zellhofer, the only question I have for you at this point is, when I made my comments earlier, do you understand what I was saying, that from this point forward, if we pass this zoning, that it will be treated differently if you do not properly get your permits and you properly don't and get things done the way they're supposed to be?
Yeah, it's crystal clear.
Okay. All right. Because you are under oath, so it will be in the record that you did that. Okay.
Jared,
Yes.
do you have any additional plans for this property?
In regards to buildings, or what do you mean by plans?
Additional plans that would force you out of this special use that we're talking about?
I don't think I understand fully what you're asking. Like we just had to purchase another 1.3 acres on the south side. We plan to expand the driveway and the parking, and the main reason I had to purchase that was to create a setback for a structure back there that we didn't get a building permit for because we didn't think it was a building via the county building codes. But anyway, my family was owned that. They were nice enough to let me purchase it, which took care of that problem. So that's there's potential for something going there, but it's mainly just going to be, gravel added, if that's what you mean.
Is that property in this petition?
Yeah, it was the red line, I think, on the south portion of D's PowerPoint.
That part of this petition, or is that the next petition?
Wasn't added to the GIS map yet. It's still relatively new and added.
Okay. All right.
Well, Jared, I guess where I'm going with this question is that you probably are beyond the special use qualifications right now, theoretically, but we can't give you I-1 in that where you're at. So for you to continue to push the limits of this special use is a concern. I guess that's why I'm just trying to make sure that you're aware of that.
Yeah, understood. So I don't know if we can kind of speak outside the box, but the next petition, which we haven't gotten into, the next petition pertains to adding on to an existing industrial property that we already had changed a few years ago, if you guys happen to remember that petition, which is the railroad property south of Amboy. That one we did change to I-1, which is contiguous to the next petition. Without commingling this too much, the special use permit that I'm asking for today on this first petition is more of a temporary fix to try and get to the permanent fix, which would be to eventually move the manufacturing portion of my business to the highway. The current location is not good for many reasons, such as road postings, which is currently on. We have no three-phase power, and just nobody, there's 6 houses on the entire road, so there's not a lot of traffic on that road. So I don't know if you're asking if my plan is to continue to expand the manufacturing at 1749. No, I would say we've pretty much reached our plateau of what we can do there, and the long-term plan is to get the industrial property moved to the industrial property. But that's going to take time, money, etc. So which the next petition is part of that plan, if you will.
So what about 1760 Winding Road? Dee brought that up.
Yeah, so 1760, which actually that's the last building permit we pulled out, which that was not 2011. That was probably around 5 years ago. 6 years ago, but that's the last building permit that I pulled out. That building and location is multiple use. It's primarily has trucks and farm equipment and tractors. The building also does have lumber inside of it. I think that was what was the concern of D, it being, I believe she called it a materials yard. And I believe that that petition, unfortunately, we didn't get that in this, the deadline to be in this one. So that one got pushed to next month. But in that petition, we are asking for that to be Ag 1 for materials yard. Special use, Ag 1.
I don't have any other questions right now.
I have a question. Approximately, and I know that there's economic things going on and whatever, approximately, how long do you anticipate it would be until you move to that I-1 property?
Great question. So it was a 5 to 10 year plan after I got it rezoned. I just recently, and when I say recently, I believe it was actually over the Christmas Day or New Year, or excuse me, Christmas Eve, when I started developing that railroad property. It was 40, 50 years of overgrown trees, brush. You couldn't even walk it. I'm finding out that I probably never should have bought it. The property is very, very narrow. It's approximately 20 foot higher than the highway. So entrance into it is almost impossible. With our current layout, we would need a building wider than what that property can accommodate. So we're running into some challenges there. The next petition, the main reason I'm trying to acquire that property is for the driveway. There's only one driveway between Dry Gulch Road and Mormon Road along that entire stretch of 52. And the next petition encompasses that. So I'm basically trying to purchase and change the zoning of that property mainly for the driveway and some more frontage. I can't really put a time frame on that. And now, if I was to build a building today, even though I buy materials and manufacture materials, for instance, lumber is triple what it was last March. So it would be pretty hard to build anything. And for what I'm seeing of the lumber futures, the next 12 to 20 plus months are not going to get any better with lumber. So that really stalls things out as far as even trying to plan a large construction project.
I can't remember what year did we actually do that first piece?
That's a great question. My memory is, well, you may have to refer to D because
Sorry, 2019.
19?
yeah, I think it was, she had just taken over the job because we had worked with Chris previous to that. So did you say January of 19? Yeah. So about 2 years ago.
I can't hear you.
Mr. Zellhofer, how big is the parcel that's zoned industrial?
The one from 2 years ago?
Yes.
It's approximately 7.6, I think.
Let's put on.
I'm really a little bit torn here. I think the permit issue, although it's problematic, is something that could be worked out with Dee and Mr. Zellhofer. My bigger concern is that we basically have a manufacturing operation, and we have more employees in this facility or at this facility than is allowed by ordinance. We have recently turned down an expansion of one less than this with fewer employees and probably less than, it was purely a construction business, not manufacturing at all. We've also had in recent years other businesses who exceeded that family-owned operation have to move their businesses or be in a position to move their businesses. And I have a real problem even following through on the special use because I think it's inappropriate. I think this would be a zoning change, not a special use, and I'm not even sure how feasible that is. You know, I don't want to put Mr. Zellhofer out of business. I don't want to have him tear buildings down because obviously that probably would put him out of business as well. But I'm not sure where the best way to go in this because moving forward under this as a special use seems highly inappropriate to me.
I'll make a comment there. Number one, the one we did make move was specifically in a township that had an agricultural zone. And it was specifically designed as an agricultural zone, and the township said the business was in the wrong spot. Second thing, I'm like you, I'm not here to put Mr. Zellhofer out of business and that, but I do want to remind you that with special uses, we can put specifications on them and we could put a time limit on this.
Well, that's a little bit of my concern based on what you and Mr. Zellhofer were just addressing a little bit earlier. I was leaning that direction as well, but I understand his concerns in terms of the cost and the timing and the inability to make any type of what I would consider a reasonable time frame to shifting the manufacturing side of this business. So I'm somewhat at a loss as to where to go on this, but I just feel that special use is not the right route. But maybe it is, but I don't know how we put the correct limitation or the appropriate limitations on it.
But if we did something where we gave him a time limit for a period of time, and I'll use one as 5 years. And if he hasn't completed anything that, he has to come back before our board. And if we don't see some significant progress, whether it's getting everything moving forward, then maybe that's the time. But you got to be reasonable and see where we go. And once again, we do something as this board, it's still the county board's decision when we get done.
I think a time limit's a good idea. I don't know what that is, but I think it's even more important that everything stops there. There's no more construction, no more increase in manufacturing. That's where I was going with my earlier questions, that this is to correct back mistakes that have been made. We cannot, I don't think we're giving him permission to expand the operation at this point at that location. I was just gonna say, we're between a rock and a hard place here. We flat can't give you I-1. And like everybody said, it seems like that would be cruel punishment to just say you got to be shut down. So we got to come to a compromise here somehow. You help us out here, Jared. You throw an idea out at us.
Okay, well, I do have one question when you're speaking of this time limit. So we do run multiple businesses out of there. So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that what you're referring to on the time limit of the special use is the Z-Best manufacturing. So would the special use continue on for the property for the Triple Z construction? Or are you saying that it'd be terminated 100% and I wouldn't be able to run any business out of that location?
I can't speak for the others, but my concern predominantly is the manufacturing side of it and the number of employees operating out of that particular location. Both are just inappropriate to
Okay.
to zoning.
I should have probably been clearer on the employee situation. There's not 12 employees working out of that location. Cause like the Triple Z guys, you know, they're the crew, they're traveling. They might be there so it's not like they're all in that building at the same, but that's,
Unfortunately, and I'm going to butt in there, unfortunately, that's a situation that we've already faced, and it
Yeah.
doesn't matter that they're not physically working there full time, that they're coming in and gathering getting their assignments or whatever.
understood.
Still complicates the issue.
Mr. Pratt, this is Courtney Kennedy. You've asked for a proposal. If we were to consider, a special use with a limitation on 5 years for him to transition Z-Best, the manufacturing side, out to a different location. And when you say everything stops, I'm assuming you mean everything stays the status quo, so he doesn't take on anymore. He doesn't add another physical expansion. I think that's something workable and livable.
Yeah, the general contracting is still a concern. I think that's where Glenn was going too. And I assume that can be moved pretty easy. If it's just an office program.
Well, another concern that I would have is that my property taxes on the parcel are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $14,000 to $15,000 a year, from what Wendy told me. And if I'm not allowed to operate some kind of business out of there, I'm not entirely sure how I can afford that kind of property tax bill. Is there a way to have an ag-related special use permit, whether it's the construction or something similar that falls under that classification after we move the manufacturing business out of there?
Well, I think part of the issue here is that when you started and you were doing lawn care and landscape services and general carpentry, and you were doing it primarily as yourself, those were all fine. You've just expanded on this property into the manufacturing side, expanded the construction side of it, both, from even an employee standpoint. You've kind of put yourself between a rock and a hard place in that you've violated ordinances during the normal growth of business or the expansion of your business, as you said, to get diversified. But it's kind of made a mess of things, and I'm not, I'd like to get some clarification right now. I'm almost tempted to ask to recess this until maybe you and your attorney can put some sort of proposal together consistent with what we're talking about in terms of moving the manufacturing out, dealing with a timeline, taking a look at the employee level in that business. And if you want to keep the business, the landscape, the lawn care, and I know that you moved away from those because of the competition. There's probably some other things in there that you can do on a related basis, and maybe somebody that knows more of the specifics and the detail than I can can help you with that, whether it's your attorney or your attorney and Ms. Duffy to figure out what can appropriately be fit there. But I just wish there was an opportunity, some sort of reasonable compromise within a reasonable time frame that could be developed.
Zellhofer, do you do any farming? You said something
I
about.
can't hear
equipment
you,
or
Craig.
something.
You
Craig.
gotta get it.
You do any farming then? You got-
So between my family, my father, myself, and my mother, we own over 2,000 acres. There's not a lot of it tillable, probably in the 600 acre range. We don't personally farm those acres, but we're involved personally in a lot of CRP maintenance, tree forestry programs, other types of maintenance related to the farms. That's where the 1760, like almost all the equipment used is stored at that facility. And then my grandfather also has a barn that some of the equipment is stored in as well.
Okay, thank you. How far are you behind on paying the county?
I'm sorry?
How far are you behind paying on the county assessments on those lands that you
Taxes?
taxes? Yeah, how far?
I'm not behind at all on taxes. To my knowledge,
I
we,
thought you were saying you were behind on these buildings that did not get zoned. You didn't get them zoned.
well, to my knowledge, we've, and I think Corporal Yater investigated this more thoroughly, but I think we've always paid taxes on all the structures there, even the ones that didn't have building permits.
Someone didn't get permits, so I just wondered.
Yeah. To my knowledge, we've always paid taxes on them, and I'm not in the rears of anything I'm aware of.
Mr. Zellhofer, who is your tax assessor currently then down Amboy?
I don't know if, well, okay, so that's a little tricky on that road because there's actually two townships. The north side of that road is the Amboy. The south side of that road is May Township. To my knowledge, I don't know if they actually have an assessor for Amboy or May. Currently, I think that they are just using the independent firm, whoever is that the county has hired, and the new software program.
So Jared, another question. If we did something like Glenn's talking about and put this off for another month, does that create a hardship for you?
No, I mean, it's been 14 or 13 months at this point, so I don't, it's still hanging over my head, but that's it. Yeah, if this is what it needs to be right, I don't want to rush into anything, and I want to make sure everyone ends up as happy as can be. So if are you saying that you think it needs to be pushed another month in order to come up with a proposal on our end, or are you saying you're going to come up with something that's acceptable to you?
No, I would like to have you and your attorney come up with a couple options for us on what you think you can do. And to Glenn's point about what D thinks could be allowed under special use, so that when this is all done, your special use is a valid zoning there where you're at, and you're completely compliant under special use. As of
Okay.
now, you never will. Theoretically, you never would be compliant under special use. But if we can figure out a way that, yeah, if you can spell it out that over 5 years or 7 years that you can do this, and that'd make it a lot easier and a lot cleaner for everybody involved.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay, I have another question for you, Mike and Glenn and everybody. If we put off the special use, my thoughts are we should probably, so that he has some solid thing, we should go through the next petition, which is the one that he wants for the additional property for the I-1 zoning.
Correct. I agree.
That way he's got a firmer way to go about the plan.
I have no problem with that.
Okay. So where we are, somebody want to have this petition go to the next meeting?
I would make a motion that we defer petition 21-P-1559 to the March meeting to allow Mr. Zellhofer and his
To our April meeting,
April, what did I say?
April
Oh.
1.
Yeah, it is. April to the April 1st meeting to allow Mr. Zellhofer and his attorney time to put a proposal together that would attempt to deal with the special use, accommodating the current property, and having a plan to move the manufacturing and some of the employees to the I-1 property.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. This motion will move to this next meeting for reconsideration, continuing consideration. No, we're going to do the next one.
Oh, that's right.
The next petition is petition 21-P-1560. The petitioner is Mr. Jared Zellhofer, permanent parcel number 02-15-26-200-002, Amboy Township. The petitioner is requesting a map amendment for the purpose of conducting a business for construction of agricultural buildings, production of steel roofing, lawn care and landscaping, and general carpentry. And we're getting a map. I have a question for the state's attorney. It's a very simple question. That's a very simple question. Since he's already been sworn in on the first one and he's been sworn in the meeting, do we need to swear him in on this petition? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dee, for not giving me that petition earlier, because I would have not liked to read all of that, okay? Thank you. So, Mr. Zellhofer, if you would, please explain what is pink and what is yellow. And you said there was a place where you could get onto this property from there, so.
Okay, give me 1 second to get my bearings here.
What's that?
Can I make a comment? The map I gave you, I believe is correct. Attorney Kennedy, correct? The highlighted areas?
Yep.
I've also added the, from our comprehensive plan, the local economic opportunities and the future land use map. And according to the Amboy land use plan, this is an appropriate location for this request.
Okay.
Do we have an ability to share this map and some of that detail for those on Zoom? Otherwise, as we're having this discussion about the map and the detail, they don't have a good reference point.
Dave was going to find a way to put it up on the board. What's that? Okay. I'm just saying, Mike doesn't have a picture.
I've got a map. She sent me a map today, so I've got a good outline of it for myself.
Okay.
There is somebody else on Zoom as well, so that was, I
Right.
didn't know you had one mic, but I also know there's somebody else on Zoom, so.
That's actually my uncle, and he's pretty familiar with the property.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe we didn't need to do this.
Well, you don't need to do it for me. I'm covered. I've got it.
Well,
I've got a good-
and Jared just said the other individual on Zoom is his uncle and he's familiar with the property, so I was just concerned. I didn't know that you had one and I wasn't sure who the other party on Zoom was, so I didn't want this thing having any type of violation or somebody being concerned that they didn't understand what we were talking about. D, I think we found out that we probably don't need to share it at this point because Mike says he's got it and the other person is Jared's uncle.
Well, I only gave Mike the map, the highlighted map,
Okay,
not the
that's fine.
comprehensive plan maps.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Zellhofer, and
Okay, so if you look at the highlighted pink area, that is the 7.61 acres that we changed to I-1 2 years ago. That's Highway 52 that runs along there. The yellow section is the 6 acres that we're asking the petition for. Also old railroad property, non-tillable land. It's contiguous, as you can see. When you get all the way to the bottom right-hand corner, the end of the yellow highlighted line, that is where the driveway access is to the property. And at that point, the highway comes up and the property goes down, so they're practically level. Almost everywhere else in this entire stretch, all the way back to the original property, the highway is much, much lower than the railroad property, or in some areas, it's actually the reverse. Like I said, originally, the only driveway access from Mormon Road to Dry Gulch Road, that entire stretch of property, is this driveway here. Delbert Kessel Trust, or Susan Kessel Trust, I believe, is the current owner, entered into a purchase contract with them contingent upon zoning. And basically what I surveyed off was just past the driveway. So this is another piece of the puzzle to try and develop this industrial property to eventually move the manufacturing portion out there. A lot of this is too skinny to build on, but like I said, it does have the driveway access, which is very important. It's currently, I believe, reverted back to Ag 1, just like my previous parcel was. And I'm not sure what else, other information you're looking for on it.
Mr. Zellhofer, and, I understand this is probably going to lead to a long driveway for you on that property. But more specifically, and I think you alluded to it a little earlier, how are you going to position your buildings on this property? The depth, if I'm reading this properly, it looks like your depth on this property is something around 115 feet. And I don't know if that's the widest point, but maybe a little bit wider in some of that yellow section.
Yeah, and you're referring to the pink property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's what you said you were originally going to develop for industrial purposes, and I didn't know if.
Yeah, so one of the obstacles I'm finding is not only that property, yes, shows that it's 115, maybe 130, maybe narrower, but that is not usable because on both sides of the property, there's tremendous slopes. So the actual buildable width is still undetermined because I'm still clearing it. I mean, I haven't even gotten all the trees off of it yet and actually see what I'm dealing with. And now I'm running into different elevations where there must have been multiple train rails going through there. So to answer your question, I'm not even 100% sure what I'm working with here to tell you where the building would go.
Keep in mind, if it is an I-1 zone, he has to remain 65 feet back from the front property line.
Ooh.
65 feet?
5 feet.
I thought when I emailed you, it was like 35 feet or something like that.
For an I-1 zoning.
Dude, was that?
What's your front property line?
You're looking at it on here. It's the right of way. The whole property's, some of this property's only, well, at the far end of the one we're petitioning is only 69 feet wide.
No, you wouldn't be building on that part anyway.
Well,
but
understood, but
when we talk about the front of the property, are we talking about where it's facing the roadway?
yes, right, along 52. And is that from 52 or is that from the actual?
I don't know your business plan. I don't know how
No,
you're going to set this up.
No, my question is the 65 feet from the edge of the highway or is it from
your front property line. I don't know where your side property line is, where your rear property, I don't know your business plan. Where are you going to put is there going to be a building on there? Usually we take it from the driveway, the front, I'd have to know where your front property line is. Is it going to be Route 52?
My property does not go to 52. You're looking at my property. The right of way is back a long ways from 52.
What is the side property lines, D? What's that?
15 feet
15
from
feet?
side and rear.
I don't mean to ask a dumb question, Dee, but what determines what is the front of a property? Is it the way a building faces, like the front of?
I'm not sure at this moment.
Okay.
I would say where your entrance is.
So that means if I put an entrance on 52, then 52 becomes the front of the property. If I put an entrance on Dry Gulch, then Dry Gulch becomes the front of the property. Well, that dramatically changes things potentially in the planning part of it. That makes a huge difference.
That's a little bit why I was asking, is if we're asking you to develop a plan and to give us a timeline as to when you can, get onto the I-1 property, then probably behooves you to understand where you're going to position that building and what the complications or the issues that you're going to have to deal with there. So that, I mean, I know we're jumping a little bit back and forth between the two issues, but I think right now they're somewhat integrated.
Yeah, I agree.
What's the property on the other side? 52 is on one side, what's the other one?
Currently, there's two different fields behind there, two different owners. One, Delbert Kessel owns part of it, and Donnie Bennell owns the other part. So that there is room back there, but of course, that's not my property. I don't know if I'd say impossible. 2 years ago, right during the time I was acquiring and changing the zoning of this, ComEd reran their main transmission line, which used to run right across the middle of that field and then back to Dry Gulch, and they ran it down Dry Gulch across the corner of my property and put a pole right smack in the middle of where the driveway needs to be. So I don't know what it would take to relocate a ComEd transmission line. I guess anything's possible if you have enough money, but they certainly made it a lot less feasible. And there's also a main drainage right at the corner, the left-hand corner of that pink box. So there's really no development that can go there because that's a main culvert that drains all the way to the river.
To clarify, just a point, I think the front setback is 65 feet from the right of way, but that's something that we would need to take into consideration in planning and coming up with a proposal.
I mean, it's not impossible to put a narrow, wide, a shallow building that's fairly wide, but I'm just saying, that's just one of the issues you're going to have to deal with.
In hindsight, I should have never bought this property. My family owned it. It was close to town, et cetera. But now the challenges that I'm finding, we realistically should, if we were going to build, we would need a building 120 feet wide. And this whole property's barely that, not taking into account driveways and any setbacks and anything of that nature. So, but there's not a lot of properties out there. That's one real challenge in the county, is that there is thousands and thousands of businesses and not very many commercial and industrial properties in the county.
Would it be feasible for you to do a building that was, and I'm just going to throw out a rough number, looking at what you need for the back and the front, would it be feasible to do a building that was 120 wide and 50 feet deep or 45 feet deep?
Well, okay, so the product moves in a linear fashion, going outdoors on conveyors and et cetera. So unfortunately, you can only run the material kind of one way, and you have to have multiple doors to get product in, out, et cetera.
Guys,
We have yet, I'm sorry.
Guys, I hate to interrupt, but I think we're getting way off of course here. We don't really need to know what you're going to put on this property to decide this. I don't need to know anyhow. That's your problem. The question whether this should be I-1 or not is the question we got to deal with, and then you figure out what you want to do with it.
That's my fault, Mike. The only reason I brought it up was knowing that the what we're dealing with with him having to make plans to move the manufacturing from the current property to this one, and I'm just questioning the feasibility on
Well,
that. So
understand.
you're right on the question of whether we changed the code, but it was me that kind of went that direction and got him off track, so I apologize.
Yeah, and the two aren't really related. I mean, if he wants this zoned I-1, I think we can make that decision. And then if he can't come up with a plan that's acceptable to us next month to move it here, then he's got another problem. But let's just address whether this is I-1 or not. And the fact that Amboy is in favor of this, I mean, I think for him, this becomes a much more valuable property for some retailer or something, who knows? But I mean, if Amboy's in favor of this, it's hard not to see this as an extension of I-1. Is that correct, Dee? They were in support of this?
Yes.
So do we have any other discussion? Or Mike, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I make a motion that we recommend to the full county board that this be approved.
Do we need to go through the full finding of facts, or do you want to just, based on the current usage and the Amboy plan, want to just address it that way?
I think that would be the way to address it at this time.
Which? Yeah.
I think the Amboy plan,
Okay.
based upon the recommendation of the Amboy.
Well, I just made a motion, then we can discuss that if you want, but you probably ought to second the motion and discuss it if you want.
It was seconded.
Okay,
Gene seconded it.
okay.
And all we were doing was, Glenn was talking about, do we go through all of the findings of facts, or the main finding of fact would be that Amboy blessed it?
And it's non-tillable?
It's non-tillable, it's railroad property. Actually, for the time being, nothing will change about it, whether it's the traffic pattern or anything, because it's still covered up with trees and whatever, and it's in a quote unquote, at the moment, non-usable state. Any other discussion?
This request for a map amendment then is just just I-1?
It's just to make it to I-1.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, because it attaches to January of 2019.
Before we call the question, the state's attorney is looking something up.
Yep, I would agree.
call them findings of fact. Or we call them findings of fact. Right. No, we still have to find facts. Okay. We'll find them before we go. I'll just make a comment on the first one, the existing uses of nearby property. You're basically attaching an I-1 and you're extending it. Any comments on that?
No, only to add that the other parcels would be on either side of that property would be either roadway or agricultural.
Correct.
The extent property values will be diminished by any zoning restrictions. I would say they probably would be increased rather than diminished.
Simply because you're increasing the zoning qualification as to what you can use it for.
Plus developing relatively undeveloped or undevelopable land.
Okay, do we need to make any of these as motions, as statements of fact? Okay. So on the very first one, can I have somebody make a motion on that one?
So move.
Second.
Okay. The motion is that the existing uses of nearby property are I'm looking for the word.
Are compatible.
Are compatible. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Glenn? Next one's yours.
Okay, the extent property values will be diminished by any zoning restrictions. Motion being that property values would not expect to be diminished, but in fact may be enhanced based on development of the property.
Here a second.
Second.
Glenn or Gene seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
The extent to which the destruction of property values promotes the public health, safety, and welfare. As already noted, it would not be anticipated that property values would be diminished or disturbed.
That in the form of a motion?
That would, I would make that as a motion.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
The gain to the public versus the hardship to the individual property owner. It would appear that there would be no hardship to the individual property owner, and the gain to the public would be the potential for increased taxes and employment.
I hear a second.
Second.
Gene seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Suitability of the subject property for zoned purposes. It would be consistent with the adjacent property, and no other definable use is noted at this time.
I hear a second.
Second.
Gene seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
The next item, the length of time the property has been vacated is zoned, considered in the context of land development in the vicinity of the subject property. Dee, do you know how long it's been since that railroad's been abandoned?
Idea. Dean, would you know?
20, yeah, probably 30.
Then stating that the property has been vacant as it's currently zoned for not less than 20 years. You have a second on that?
Second.
Gene seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries.
The compatibility of the present and proposed classification with the comprehensive plan. I would motion that as presented by zoning administrator D. Duffy, this is consistent with Amboy's comprehensive plan.
I hear a second.
Second.
Gene seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries.
Whether there is a public need in the neighborhood for the proposed use. I would say at this time that that's undetermined.
I don't know whether, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't know whether I quite agree with that, because determined is that his business needs to be on that kind of property.
Yeah.
So there is a need at this point.
Well, I was referencing the public need, so.
Okay.
So anyway, that was my comment. But read it again.
Whether there is a public need in the neighborhood for the proposed use.
We have a, did you say yes or no, or?
I'll make the motion that the public need is undetermined, although the petitioner has a specific need relevant to his business.
Here a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Now, that we have those in there, let's go back to Mike's motion. And Mike, would you restate your motion?
I make a recommendation that I guess I make a motion that we recommend this to the full county board for passage.
And Gene seconded it before, and now we have the findings of fact. Or any other discussion on this? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The motion has been carried by this board. Will go before the full county board on the 18th. Correct? Okay. Next thing. We need to make a motion to recess.
Actually, I have some,
What's that?
I have some housekeeping that we need to take care of, just the zoning board. I mean, the petitioners could leave, but
Do we want to close? Is it housekeeping that we need to talk about in the meeting or?
our meeting date times and a past petition that I'd like to talk to you about.
Okay. Go ahead before we adjourn,
Right.
Before we recess.
before we recess.
We were talking about, and you guys could leave if you want. I mean, you're welcome to stay.
You might want to hear this.
Meeting times, 7 o'clock is what we've been doing for years. With these bigger solar and wind projects, we got it down to 6 o'clock so we can get out of here earlier.
But my only thing on that is we have a farmer, a farmer, a farmer, and a farmer. And as we go into April and May, and June, and July, and August, I'm not sure that we shouldn't be at the later time of 7 o'clock. And then when we get into winter, then we can go back to the 6 o'clock meetings.
That would make me happy.
That would make you what?
That would make me happy, yes.
Okay.
Daylight saving changes March 14th, so
So April to September, summer months, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
October to March, winter months, 6 o'clock.
No, I'd go past October though.
Yeah, I was gonna say November to April at 6 o'clock and May to October, 7 o'clock.
Up to you guys.
Yep.
Okay. November to, is that fine with you, Mike?
November to April
I-
at 6 and then May to October at 7.
Yeah, November's still questionable, but that's fine. I can live with that if everybody else wants it.
Okay.
Want to make a motion for that?
Anybody want to make a motion?
So move.
We have a second, Gene?
he was ready.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
So Mr. Brian Florsheitz reached out to the county board chairman and asked for a little more time to build his home. If you recall this petition last year, his home was to be built within 1 year, and that will be April 1st. And he hasn't gotten the foundation in yet. So I talked to the board chairman and wondering if the ZBA would be willing to work with Mr. Florsheitz to give him maybe a 60-day extension to July to get his foundation in and have a plan on what he intends on having done and completed by July 1st.
So 60 days from the 1st of April? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, that'd be
That'd be
90
June
days.
30th.
That would be 90 days. I'd actually, quite honestly, considering weather issues and that potentially can be in April and May, I'd be more inclined to give him 90 days on it.
Have they done anything yet?
No.
Do we? I have a question. Do we need to do that tonight or should we do that on the 1st of April? Because that's actually the end of his period of time at the present time.
The other side of
Should
that
it be
is
on the agenda?
it's not on our, yeah, I don't think we can.
Should be on the agenda for April?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mike, can you hear what's been going on? Did you hear the last bit that's been going on?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Mr. Floor Sheets did not get his foundation or begin his home within the year that we granted him.
Yeah, I
would
heard
like-
all that. I just didn't hear what was going on with the state's
He
attorney.
would like to have another 90 days. And I said, it's not on our agenda to make a motion on it tonight. But I think we ought to put it on the agenda for our April 1st meeting to address it at that time.
That's fine with me.
Okay. We don't have to make a motion on that, do we? We just tell Dee to do it. Okay. All right. Anything else, housekeeping? Wait a minute. You got one more. You have an announcement of what is happening because we were supposed to adjourn for the March 18th meeting from the past recess. You want to tell them what's going on with our? It's on now.
Oh, the Celtics and Solar.
They didn't. We didn't. No, we didn't.
Oh, you didn't. Sorry, I can't.
Would you tell them what the county board is not going to vote on this month? And
Big
we
Sky
get-
withdrew before it went to county board. Another company is buying the Big Sky. And they aren't familiar and don't want to work with the GE products. And they'd rather put a Vesta machine on top. So they're going to come in and repetition.
Oh,
And we're going to do that. This is three times for the same within a year. So they're coming in and you said May or June.
They haven't repetitioned yet.
No, but you said either they were thinking May or June. Anyway,
But we do need to make a motion to adjourn the petition for South Dixon Solar because that was turned down in county board.
okay.
I would make a motion to adjourn pursuant to county board's vote on petition 20P1558.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second to adjourn on petition 20-P-1558. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Adjourned.
Any other housekeeping? Then I would make a motion, we recess until after the county board's March 18th meeting.
Recess until our next meeting. which will be
Meeting on April 1st, yeah.
We have a motion to recess until April 1st. All, second. Gene seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
recessed.
Bye, Mike.